It's important to remember that if somebody else has done something before, and even if it's remotely that you think it's similar to what you're actually doing, you could draw some sort of analogical comparison, it means that you can do it too. I think that is an important thing to take a step back and remember that it might seem impossible. It might seem really difficult with whatever you're working on right now. But it is absolutely possible if you can draw some sort of analogical comparison between you and what somebody else has done. And the thing that's interesting that you can possibly do is that there's this thing called best practices, right? So best practices is basically mimicking other people and seeing what they actually did. And now, when you do this sort of mimicry behavior, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to have the same sort of success rate, and it doesn't mean that you're going to mimic it exactly. But what you're doing is drawing an analogical comparison between what you're actually doing and what the other person is doing, and seeing how you can draw a connection between what you're actually doing and seeing if it actually makes sense to mimic at least partly some of that, or see if you can create a new story on how it actually works with what you're actually doing. So it's important to remember that, you can draw analogical comparisons between anything and anybody and sort of see what they're doing. And often you might sort of have a collection of, these reference in your mind, and you put those ones together to create your own particular story. So you often think copying or mimicking other people is a bad thing. That's not true at all. That's in fact how you actually develop new ideas, is you look to see what other people have done and you draw those connections with what other people have done and see if you can follow suit. So the idea is to perform some is to look at people that you think actually are role models and draw some imaginary connection between you and them. But here's the trouble, is that you don't know those people. You really just see the spotlight version of them, whatever that spotlight version, whether it's on social media, whether it is in the academic life. We often read somebody else's ideas. You don't know those people at all. You don't understand where they're coming from. And so you have this imaginary view of who they are and what they're about. But you sort of think about what they're about in terms of your lens. And so automatically, simply by mimicking other people and using your own filter, right? Like, this is an old story in sociology. It's called the looking glass self, where you look at other people and you see yourself through those other people. And as you do that, you create your own story. You interpret your own environment. You understand what you're about, and then you are understanding what you can possibly do next and sort of see the future through other people. So you make sense of the world around you by looking at what other people are actually doing, and you understand what's the possibility that you can possibly do. So I think it's important to think about this as like, if somebody else in your immediate vicinity has done something similar, then you could probably do it as well. And it's important to sort of look at, the entire landscape. There's a lot of people that have done outstanding things, right? So whether it is a, world-class musician, whether it is a social media influencer, whether it's a, world-class academic, you might want to sort of start thinking about how other people have done it and mimicking their particular behavior and what they've actually done. And it's never going to be perfect. And here's the thing, it's a dynamic process. So you might mimic somebody early on, but then as you go through the motions, something else happens, and it doesn't sort of, what you're mimicking has changed, right? So this happens to me a lot, where I, particularly, with social media, is in finding somebody that you can listen to that might be a legitimate role model. There's just not a lot out there. There's a lot of, right-wing kind of nonsense that's out there, and you start listening to them, you realize that these people are not really good people. After you've listened to them for a long, long time, and you develop this like, oh man, who are these people anyways, right? Like they're deep down inside not nice people. And so you have to sort of recalibrate, and that's happened to me a bunch of times, but it takes a long time to figure that out because, obviously if people are in the limelight, that probably means that they're charismatic, because people are attracted to them in some sort of way. Charisma makes a big difference. And it takes a long time to understand who those people actually are deep down inside. And so it's like me, I'm a complicated person as well. I preach, that try to be nice to other people, but I'm doing that because I know deep down inside I have my own issues, and I get, all of those other emotions that everybody else has, right? Like jealousy, looking at sort of power dynamics, everything, right? And you feel that way. And so it's me, this is, I think, my unique difference is that I'm actually talking to myself. I'm not talking to anybody else, just trying to sort of show people this sort of, I am somehow fancy or whatever. Maybe that's going to change as they get older and all that kind of stuff and do this more, but I hope not in terms of who I am. I hope, and that's where I'm trying to do something that's unique. I'm trying to be me as a person and sort of dictating, my experiences. So the more that I can go on walks and do those kind of things, I think that becomes more of me, and I like that. I want to make this as much as part of me as possible. So I want everybody to sort of remember that is as you mimic other people and as you sort of think about other people, remember it's always you anyways, right? Like don't be afraid of that. Unless you're an absolute cutout portrait of those people, but that's never going to really happen. You're going to make your own way. And I've seen it where you do see that, right? You see sort of really strong similarities because you know what's happening, but that's okay, right? Like that's absolutely okay to do that. And eventually, so in the short term, you're like, that person did that thing, copied that same idea as me or whatever. But in the long term, you start developing your own voice. And everybody starts doing that, right? You start gravitating. It's a dynamic process. You go in different directions. And you sort of have to think about like, hey, I'm my own person anyways, and you don't have to pay attention to those people after all, as you develop this. And so I want you to sort of think about that, right? Like you can mimic other people, and that's actually a really great way to think about this. If somebody else has done it, you can too. But then figure out how you can develop your own voice throughout the process. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.